Ah, the Yakuza. The tattooed warriors of Japan, part Robin Hood, part ruthless gangsters and full-time enigmas. But where did it all begin? And why do they chop off their pinkies like it's some bizarre loyalty program? Let's dive into the chaotic, colorful history of Japan's most infamous organized crime syndicate, the Yakuza. Our journey begins in the bustling streets of Edo period Japan, where the seeds of the Yakuza were sown. Amidst the samurai and merchants, a different breed emerged, the Bakuto, gamblers who lived on the fringes of society, and the tekiya, peddlers who honed their skills in the art of persuasion. These two groups, bound by their outsider status and a strict code of conduct, would eventually give rise to the Yakuza. Through the centuries, the Yakuza adapted and evolved, mirroring Japan's tumultuous history. They weathered the Meiji Restoration, the rise of modern Japan, and World War II, emerging each time as a force to be reckoned with. From the gambling dens of old Edo to the corporate boardrooms of modern Tokyo, the Yakuza have left their mark on every facet of Japanese society. Picture this: Edo, the heart of Japan in the 17th century. Samurai strut through the streets, merchants hawk their wares, and in the dimly lit corners of tea-houses and gambling dens, a different breed gathers, the Bakuto. Outcasts, ronin and fortune-seekers living by their wits and dice. Their game, Oichokabu, synonymous with the Yakuza, a game of chance, skill and nerves of steel. The worst hand, 8-9-3 Yakuza, loser. Ironically, a term for defeat became a badge of honor. While the Bakuto were rolling the dice in the gambling dens, another group was making their mark on the streets of Edo, the tekiya. These weren't your run-of-the-mill peddlers. They were masters of persuasion, silver-tongued salesmen who could charm the coins right out of your purse. They traveled from town to town, setting up stalls at festivals and markets, offering everything from genuine samurai swords to miracle cures. The tekiya were masters of their craft, skilled in the art of the deal and the power of a good story. They understood the desires and fears of the common folk, and they weren't afraid to bend the truth to make a sale. They were the original con artists, but beneath their slick exteriors, they too operated within a strict code of conduct. In the margins of Edo society, the Bakuto and the tekiya forged their own path. They were outcasts, gamblers and peddlers, but they found strength in their shared experiences, their outsider status. They created their own rules, their own codes of conduct, and their own sense of justice in a world that often seemed unfair. Loyalty became paramount. A man's word was his bond, and betrayal was the ultimate sin. They protected their own, settled disputes internally, and presented a united front to the outside world. This sense of brotherhood, forged in the crucible of hardship and adversity, would become a defining characteristic of the Yakuza. Hold on to your hats, folks, because we're about to enter the Meiji era, a time when Japan decided to ditch the feudal pajamas and embrace the Western three-piece suit. It was a period of rapid modernization, and the Yakuza, ever the adaptable bunch, saw an opportunity amidst the chaos. They realized that in this new Japan, with its factories, railroads and burgeoning cities, there was money to be made, and where there's money there are always shadows. The samurai, once the undisputed badasses of Japan, were suddenly as useful as a screen door on a submarine. Their swords and top-knots were no match for the changing times, and many found themselves out of work and out of luck. Some, however, saw an opportunity to reinvent themselves. They joined the Yakuza, bringing their martial skills and their strict code of honor to this evolving underworld organization. Now, let's get one thing straight. The Yakuza might have been dressing like businessmen, but they weren't exactly following the rules of fair play. They understood that power, especially in a rapidly changing society, often comes from operating in the shadows, from pulling strings that nobody else can see. They became masters of leverage, using their influence to broker deals, intimidate rivals, and secure their place at the table. With their deep roots in local communities and their reputation for both ruthlessness and loyalty, the Yakuza became power brokers in their own right. Politicians sought their support during elections, knowing that the Yakuza could mobilize voters and influence public opinion. Businesses, both legitimate and not so legitimate, turned to them for protection, knowing that the Yakuza could provide security that the police often couldn't. And then came the Second World War, a cataclysmic event that would reshape the world and the Yakuza's place within it. Japan was devastated, its cities in ruins, its people struggling to survive. In the chaos of defeat, the Yakuza, like phoenixes rising from the ashes, saw an opportunity to solidify their power and position themselves as saviors of the people. While the government struggled to provide for its citizens, the Yakuza stepped into the void. They organized black markets to distribute food and other essential goods, providing a lifeline to those in need. They used their organizational skills and their networks to rebuild homes and businesses, restoring a sense of order to a shattered nation. Now let's talk about something you can't miss when it comes to the Yakuza. The body art! We're not talking about some dainty butterfly on the ankle or a tribal armband here. Yakuza tattoos or Irezumi are a whole other league. These are epic full-body murals, intricate masterpieces that tell stories, declare allegiances, and, let's be honest, look pretty darn intimidating. Imagine this, a canvas that breathes, a living, breathing work of art. These tattoos aren't just decorative, they're a statement. They're a badge of honor, a symbol of commitment to the Yakuza life, and a visual testament to the pain and dedication required to earn one's place within the organization. Now, getting inked up like a Yakuza member isn't your average trip to the tattoo parlor. Forget about those fancy modern machines. We're talking about a painstaking, excruciatingly painful process, done the old-fashioned way, with needles and ink, hand-poked into the skin. It's not for the faint of heart, and it's definitely not something you can hide from your mum. This isn't just body art, it's a ritual, a test of endurance that can take years, even decades, to complete. Each session can last for hours, with the recipient enduring excruciating pain as the ink is meticulously etched into their skin. It's a physical and mental challenge, a way of proving one's commitment and resilience. Dragons, tigers, and koi are language of symbols. Now let's decode those tattoos, shall we? Because they're not just random images thrown together. Each design, each symbol has a specific meaning, a story to tell. It's a visual language, one that speaks volumes about the wearer's beliefs, their aspirations, and their place within the Yakuza hierarchy. Take the dragon, for example. It's a symbol of power, wisdom, and prosperity. It represents the wearer's strength, their ability to overcome adversity, and their ambition to rise to the top. The tiger, on the other hand, embodies courage, ferocity, and protection from evil spirits. It's a symbol of the wearer's willingness to fight for what they believe in and to protect those they care about. The Price of Transgression. Okay, folks, brace yourselves because we're about to dive into one of the most notorious and, let's face it, cringe-inducing aspects of Yakuza culture, Yubitsume, the ritualistic severing of one's own finger as a form of apology or atonement. It's not pretty, but it's a powerful symbol of the lengths to which Yakuza members are expected to go to prove their loyalty and commitment to the organization. In the hierarchical world of the Yakuza, loyalty is paramount. It's the glue that holds everything together, the foundation upon which their power and influence are built. But loyalty, as we all know, is a two-way street. It demands absolute obedience, unwavering commitment, and a willingness to make sacrifices for the good of the group. Gruesome ritual Yubitsume. So, how does this whole finger-chopping ritual work? Well, it's not as simple as just grabbing a rusty cleaver and going to town. Yubitsume is a highly ritualized act steeped in tradition and symbolism. It's a performance, a way of demonstrating remorse and a willingness to accept punishment for one's transgressions. Typically, the offending Yakuza member will be summoned before his superiors, often in a formal setting. He'll be given the opportunity to explain his actions and offer an apology. But let's be real, no amount of eloquent pleading is going to get you out of this one. The ruins of empire. The year is 1945. The rising sun now casts its glow upon a nation in ruins. World War II has left Japan a shadow of its former self. Cities lie in smouldering heaps. Industries are crippled. Amidst the wreckage, a power vacuum emerges, and into this void step the Yakuza. Official channels, crippled by defeat, struggled to respond to the immense needs of the people. The Yakuza, with their deep roots and networks, acted swiftly and decisively. They understood the desperation of the people and leveraged it to their advantage. Chivalrous organizations or shrewd opportunists. The Yakuza's actions in the post-war years earned them a paradoxical reputation as both ruthless gangsters and benevolent protectors. The Japanese government, struggling to reassert its authority and rebuild the nation, found itself in the awkward position of relying on these organized crime groups to maintain order and provide for its citizens. It was a Faustian bargain, one that would have far-reaching consequences for Japanese society. The term Ninkyo Dantai, meaning chivalrous organizations, began to circulate, a euphemism that sought to legitimize the Yakuza's activities and present them as modern-day Robin Hoods, righting the wrongs of a corrupt and inefficient government. The Yakuza, masters of propaganda and image manipulation, actively cultivated this perception, portraying themselves as protectors of the weak, upholders of traditional values, and guardians of the social order. Despite their undeniable ruthlessness and often predatory practices, the Yakuza's code of conduct, rooted in those early days of Bakuto and Takiya, retained a peculiar sense of morality, a warped sense of honor that distinguished them from common criminals. They had their own internal justice system, their own codes of conduct, and their own twisted sense of loyalty and obligation. There are countless stories, apocryphal or otherwise, of Yakuza members going to great lengths to right perceived wrongs, protect those under their protection, or uphold their end of a bargain, even when it was not in their best interest to do so. These stories, often romanticized and exaggerated, contributed to the public's complex and often contradictory perception of the Yakuza. The Yakuza weren't content with just ruling the Japanese underworld. Oh no, they had global ambitions. By the late 20th century, these tattooed trailblazers had gone international, spreading their tentacles across the globe like a particularly ambitious octopus. From the bright lights of Las Vegas to the bustling streets of Hong Kong, the Yakuza were making their presence known. Their business portfolio, as diverse as a Tokyo karaoke bar. They dipped their toes into everything from real estate and finance to arms dealing and drug trafficking. The crackdown begins, but every empire, no matter how powerful, eventually faces its decline. And for the Yakuza, the beginning of the end came in the late 20th and early 21st centuries. The world was changing, becoming more interconnected, more transparent, and the Yakuza, with their shadowy dealings and their penchant for violence, found themselves increasingly exposed. Governments around the world, realizing the threat posed by this sprawling criminal network, began to crack down. New laws were passed, targeting organized crime and money laundering. International cooperation between law enforcement agencies increased, making it harder for the Yakuza to operate with impunity across borders. A fading dragon, so where do the Yakuza stand today? Well, they haven't disappeared entirely, not yet anyway. But their power and influence have waned considerably. They're a shadow of their former selves, struggling to adapt to a world that seems to have moved on without them. They still operate in the shadows, of course, dabbling in everything from extortion and loan sharking to drug trafficking and cybercrime. But their operations are smaller, less brazen, more focused on survival than on expansion. They're like a once mighty dragon, its scales dulled, its fire dimmed, reduced to scavenging for scraps in a world that no longer fears its roar. The end of an era. The neon lights of Tokyo still flicker, casting their electric glow on the city that never sleeps. But in the shadowy corners, in the hushed whispers of back alleys, a sense of change hangs heavy in the air. The Yakuza, those enigmatic figures who once seemed as permanent a fixture in Japan's urban landscape as cherry blossoms and bullet trains, are facing an uncertain future. The dragon, it seems, is losing its fire. The world has shifted beneath their feet. The once clear lines between the underworld and the overworld have blurred, replaced by a complex web of global finance, technology, and social change that even the most cunning Yakuza boss struggles to navigate. The old ways, the codes of honor and violence that once held sway, now seem as antiquated as a samurai sword in a firefight. The Yakuza in the cultural imagination. While the Yakuza's real-world influence may be waning, their grip on the cultural imagination remains strong. They are the anti-heroes of countless films, novels, and video games, captivating audiences with stories of violence, honor, and tragic romance. From gritty realism to stylish underworlds, the Yakuza symbolize a dangerous allure that transcends cultural boundaries. Their tattoos, once a mark of criminality, now adorn high-fashion runways and celebrities. Their language and rituals offer a window into a hidden world that both repels and attracts.